So, you're the Mongols. You've just finished the world's most violent and successful equestrian tour, culminating in the conquest of China under Kublai Khan. Congratulations! You now own a sophisticated, ancient civilization with a population of about 60 million people. The problem? There are only a few 100,000 of you. This presents a slight mathematical challenge for long-term management. Kublai, now the Yuan Emperor, needed a system, a way to control a massive, educated, and justifiably grumpy population. His solution was a masterclass in how to make sure absolutely nobody likes you, which, you have to admit, is a bold administrative choice. The Yuan Dynasty's grand idea was the four-class system, which was less a social structure and more a ranked list of who you were allowed to bully. At the very top, of course, were the Mongols. They were the VIPs, enjoying perks like not paying most taxes and getting away with literal murder. Below them were the Semuren, or various kinds of people. This was a grab bag of non-Chinese foreigners, Persians, Turks, even a few Europeans like Marco Polo. They were the middle managers, the accountants, the tax collectors. Why? Because they had no loyalty to the Chinese, but the Mongols didn't quite trust them enough to give them real power. It was a brilliant solution if your goal was to be distrusted by two different groups at once. Now we get to the bottom of the pyramid, where the vast majority of people lived. Third on the list were the Hanren, the northern Chinese. These were folks from the old Jin Dynasty and other northern territories who had been under Mongol rule for a while. They were considered tolerable. But at the very bottom, in fourth class, were the Nanren, the southern Chinese from the freshly conquered Song Dynasty. There were over 50 million of them, and they were seen as the most rebellious, most sophisticated, and therefore most dangerous. They were subject to the heaviest taxes, the harshest laws, and the deepest suspicion. The system was basically designed to punish them for being the last to fall and for having a great economy the Mongols wanted to drain. The legal system under the Yuan was a magnificent piece of work. To ensure fairness, punishments were adjusted based on who you were. For example, if a Mongol killed a Han Chinese person, the penalty was a fine, roughly the price of a donkey. Yes, your life was worth a beast of burden. If a Han Chinese person so much as got into a fist fight with a Mongol, that could be a death sentence. It's a very specific definition of equal justice. This wasn't just a guideline, it was codified law. It sent a clear message. Some people were just worth more than others. And if you were a southern Chinese person, you were at the very bottom of that valuation sheet. Economically, the Yuan had some truly innovative ideas for squeezing the population dry. Han Chinese, especially Southerners, were forbidden from owning weapons. This extended to hunting bows and farming implements that could potentially be weapons. There was even a ban on cutting bamboo at night in some areas because the sound was apparently indistinguishable from an army mobilizing. The paranoia was palpable. Financially, they partnered with Semu merchants in a system called Ortok, which was essentially state-sponsored predatory lending. Mongol nobles would fund these merchants, who would then lend money to Chinese farmers at insane interest rates, all backed by the power of the state. It was a fantastic way to transfer wealth upwards and create widespread misery. For centuries, the absolute pinnacle of a Chinese scholar's career was passing the civil service examinations. It was the path to power, prestige, and a respectable government job. So, what did the Yuan do? They canceled them for nearly 80 years. This effectively decapitated the entire Chinese intellectual class from the state. When they finally brought the exams back in 1315, they came with a few tiny adjustments. Strict quotas were introduced. For every 100 government positions, Mongols and Seimu were given 50 spots, while the northern and southern Chinese had to fight over the other 50. Also, Mongols took a much easier version of the test. It's like having a marathon where half the runners get to start at mile 25. While all this was happening, Kublai Khan was deeply worried about his own people becoming too Chinese. He went to great lengths to preserve Mongol identity. In his capital, modern Beijing, he had a section of his palace grounds left as open steppe grass, where he could pitch his yurt. He promoted the Mongol language and the Fagspa script, which almost no one outside the Mongol elite ever bothered to learn. There were laws against Mongols adopting Chinese names. It created this bizarre situation where the ruling class was desperately trying to culturally isolate itself from the very civilization it was supposed to be ruling. They were living in China, but they were trying their hardest to pretend they were still on the plains of Mongolia. One of the most ironic outcomes of this whole system was a golden age for Chinese popular culture. With the official path to success, the government exams, blocked, all those brilliant scholars had to find something else to do. Many of them turned to writing plays and operas. This led to the flourishing of Yuan Dynasty theater, creating some of the most famous works in Chinese literature. It was a form of passive resistance. If you can't join the government, you might as well mock it from a stage. It's a classic case of oppression inadvertently fueling incredible art. The Mongols wanted to stifle the Chinese elite, and they ended up giving them a new, more powerful voice that reached the common people directly. You might think with such a tight grip on the Chinese, the Mongols would be a unified force. You would be hilariously wrong. The Yuan court was a snake pit of succession crises. After Kublai Khan died, there was almost constant infighting among different Mongol factions over who should be the next great Khan. Between 1307 and 1333, a span of just 26 years, there were 8 different emperors. That's an average reign of about 3 years. Some were assassinated, others were overthrown in coups. While they were busy plotting against each other, the administration of the empire fell apart. Their greatest enemy wasn't the Chinese population they were oppressing, it was their own inability to agree on anything for more than 5 minutes. To fund their lavish lifestyles and constant civil wars, the later Yuan emperors discovered the magic of the printing press, specifically for printing money. They churned out massive amounts of paper currency, called the chow, with nothing to back it up. Shockingly, this led to hyperinflation. The value of the money plummeted, and people's life savings were wiped out. At the same time, the state's tax collection system, already corrupt and inefficient, began to collapse. You had a government that was simultaneously broke and flooding the country with worthless money. It's a bold economic strategy, and it has a historical success rate of approximately 0%. As if the political and economic situation wasn't bad enough, nature decided to get in on the action. In the 1340s and 50s, the Yellow River, known as China's Sorrow, experienced a series of catastrophic floods. It even changed its course entirely, a devastating event that displaced millions and caused widespread famine. To the Chinese people, this was not just a natural disaster, it was a sign, a big, wet, muddy sign that the Yuan had lost the mandate of heaven. The Mongol rulers, who didn't subscribe to this philosophy, completely underestimated the power of this idea. They saw a plumbing problem, the Chinese saw a cosmic judgment. and it was the final spark needed to light the fire of rebellion. This perfect storm of ethnic discrimination, political instability, economic collapse, and natural disasters gave rise to the Red Turban Rebellion. It started as a peasant uprising and quickly snowballed into a full-fledged war to expel the Mongols. One of its leaders was a man named Zhu Yuancheng, a peasant-turned-monk-turned-rebel leader who would eventually succeed. By 1368, less than a century after conquering all of China, the Mongols were driven out. The last Yuan emperor fled back to the steppe, establishing the Northern Yuan Dynasty, which sounds much less impressive. The grand experiment was over. It turns out that building a society based on systematically alienating 90% of your population is not, in fact, a sustainable model for governance. Who could have possibly seen that coming? If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!